All right, everyone. So I found this video of a guy by the name of Andrew Clavin. And this video came out today. This is a video of Andrew Clavin siding with Sodom, basically saying that he knows more than St. Paul and that St. Paul was wrong in his writings against Sodom.
Many of my great friends have been gay people. I think that they are born that way. I'm not sure. I think that there's a genetic component to it. This is my personal opinion. I'm not a scientist, but I think it's carried through the mother and it happens in the womb because they've never found it in actual gay people, but it recurs in families in ways that have nothing to do with upbringing. So, for instance, twins, you can have two identical twins and one of them will be gay and the other one won't be. And that's a very strange thing. So I think it's carried by the mother and occurs in the womb. And I guess I just feel like, for me, romantic love is one of the great consolations for life. You know, because life can be very tragic and very hard, but romantic love is one of its great consolations. And I'm not ready to deprive somebody of it on a doctrine.
Right.
So I don't know how God is going to deal with a person who is in a loving, faithful homosexual relationship. It always bothers me when people quote Paul and say it's the word of God. God actually appears and speaks in the Bible. That's the word of God. Now, that doesn't mean that Paul is in error. It means that he has a personality and he sees things in a certain way, and there might be other ways to see it. So I see, Paul is an absolute genius and an inspired genius, and a genius who has actually seen the risen Christ in front of him. So it's not like I don't take him seriously, but he also is a kind of choleric, guy who's like a little puffed up, So, I mean, he says things in this kind of overblown way and all this. However, that's actually irrelevant to this question. I don't think that it seems to me that when, Jesus says it was in the beginning that a man and a woman should come together and become one flesh. I think, that's basically what I believe. But I believe that people are hobbled by this. And calling it same-sex attraction, it's not the same thing because gay men fall romantically in love with other men. An experience that I've never even come close to have. This is what some conservatives say, well, it's a choice. And I think, well, you make it. Go ahead. Let me see.
Yeah. So this is yet another example of a conservative siding with Sodom. We've seen this with Prager. We've seen this with a whole bunch of other people. We've seen this with Front Page Magazine, PJ Media. We've seen this with a bunch of people like this. And here is yet another example. Andrew Clavin. He is a Jewish guy who supposedly has converted to Christianity. And now you see him saying, oh, Paul was wrong. He was wrong. Anyway, play the clip. Now, I've never liked Clavin, but I have, until now, I did not have a reason to speak out against him because I didn't see a reason. But YouTube, with its amazing algorithm, recommended to me this video. They said, hey, Ted, you might like to watch this. Blah, blah, blah. You may want to see this. So I watched the video. As soon as I saw Matt Fradd's video, Matt Fradd is the guy who is talking with him here. As soon as I saw Matt Fradd's video and the title said, Confronting Andrew Clavin on Sodom, I said, oh my goodness, I gotta watch this one. Because I don't know about you, but I just love it when my suspicions are confirmed. It lets me know that my intuition is working, that my gut feeling is actually telling me something that I should be aware of. And I like that feeling, to know that my senses are serving me well. Because I have never liked Clavin. He has always struck me as the type of person who would side with evil. In this case, he is siding with Sodom, which is pure evil, while giving off this impression that he is compassionate. He's so I'm so compassionate. Oh, I am so compassionate. How dare St. Paul say this about Sodom and Gomorrah? It's just so lacking in compassion. It's not compassionate. We have to be compassionate. We have to be. I'm a Christian, but Paul is wrong here. I know more than Paul. I know more than him. I know more than St. Paul himself. St. Paul, I know you're Jewish. You know, we're both Jews. I got to tell you, from one Jew to another, you're wrong. You're lacking compassion. And I have seen this too many damn times. Oh, we have seen this story before. We saw this with Prager.
Suppose a man says, I view animated child porn. So there's no real victim in that sense of child pornography, which we both agree is horrendous. And by viewing animated child porn, it prevents me from acting out sexually on a child. Now, I deny that. I think that pornography inflames us to then want to act those fantasies out, and I think there's good studies that back that up. But surely you wouldn't say to the man who views animated child pornography, that's not bad so long as you don't act it out. Wouldn't you want to help this poor sick dude?
Yes, I would, but I'm thrilled that he's not acting it out. I mean,
agreed.
Okay,
of course.
Well, that's big.
Yeah.
We're both thrilled that he might have a poor substitute, but it is a substitute if that were the case. No child is being used.
Yeah.
It's all animated.
Yeah.
And he.
But would you use the word evil of animated child pornography? Because I certainly would.
No, I would use evil only with behavior. That's where we might differ, forgetting the sex issue. You can't be evil. You didn't do evil if you thought evil. You did evil
if I'm masturbating to animated pictures of pornography, I'm not doing something evil.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think that's despicable. Yeah.
Really?
Yes, of course.
Who is being hurt? You have to have a victim.
Oh, I'll tell you, there's at least two people being hurt. There's the person who's poisoning himself by encouraging him to think acting out on children, and there's also the animator.
Okay, wait a minute. We both are aching for him not to have those fantasies. I agree with you, but
you won't call it evil.
I won't call a fantasy evil.
You're in my home studio. You're in my home. I live here with a man.
I am as comfortable with these two couples as with heterosexual couples.
And by the way, for the record, right before we started, you asked me if I was married. You didn't know if I was straight or gay, and I didn't sense that you cared in any way.
And then my immediate concern was, how did you meet?
Yeah, how did?
I want to hear your romance.
Right.
I'm as interested as if it was a woman.
This is what I am.
Normal is not defined by your sexual orientation.
Yeah.
That's what normal. I'm not saying heterosexual is more normal. By the way, I actually believe bisexual is the norm. The Bible said, men, you are as happy with boys. I don't mean 8-year-olds, 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
Just as a grown man is happy with a 15-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm.
But in that sense, homosexuals and heterosexuals are identical.
And Prager was talking about how the Bible says, men, you are just as happy with girls as you are with boys. And then we saw Prager saying that animated child pornography, which is something that is considered acceptable in Japan, by the way, Prager said that animated child pornography is not evil. And any sane person, any person with a semblance of principle would hear about something so vile as animated child pornography and say, yes, that is obviously sick, twisted, and evil. Now, what have I said? I've said this numerous times. All evil is the denial of the obvious. All evil is the denial of the obvious. That's a man. No, it's actually a woman. Oh, yes, we have here, for the first time in history, a pregnant man. A pregnant man? How in the hell is that possible? Well, then you find out that actually this is a woman who did a whole bunch of weird stuff to her body and now looks like a man, and now she's pregnant. And now we're supposed to say, oh, for the first time in history, a pregnant man. This is the tyranny of the delusion. Sorry, the tyranny of delusion. And the reason why I say it's the tyranny of delusion is because they want you to believe in delusion. They want you to deny the obvious. And then if you don't want to deny the obvious, they want to use laws against you, and they want to find ways to pressure you, to coerce you to acquiesce to their evil. It is the imperialism and the despotism and the tyranny of delusion. All evil is the denial of the obvious. And it is obvious that in the Christian religion, Sodom is condemned. It is obvious that in St. Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 1, Paul describes Sodom as unnatural and evil. But Mr. Clavin and his ilk want you to think that Paul is wrong. He's wrong. He knows better than Paul. Now, Clavin is pushing right now, he is pushing the religion of the Antichrist. But he's a Christian. He tells you he's a Christian. He comes in the name of compassion and love and understanding. But he's actually pushing the doctrine of Lucifer himself, the doctrine of Antichrist. We have seen this so many times, guys. Like I said, we saw this with Prager. We saw this with the conservatives' fixation and fascination and obsession with Milo Yiannopoulos. Now, this obsession does not exist anymore because Milo is no longer really relevant. No one cares about Milo Yiannopoulos anymore. He is gone. You know, if there is such a thing as an entire system that really dictates who becomes famous and who doesn't, the powers that be told Milo, we used you, now we don't need you anymore, goodbye. And back in the day, Milo was the biggest thing in American conservatism. American and British conservatism, right, in the whole American British world. It was all about Milo. I mean, you went to all these right-wing sites, Breitbart, whatever, and it was just Milo. I mean, you would think this guy was the head of the whole conservative movement in the English-speaking world. He was everywhere, this guy. But he was Sodom. He was a member of Sodom. He was a member of the Republic of Sodom. And he was pushing Sodom. And then he began to actually push for pederasty. Pederasty. And even after it was known that he was pushing for pederasty, there were still conservatives saying, oh, well, we should just kind of be loving towards them. And I remember Alex Jones saying that Milo is the victim in all this and we shouldn't go against him. We shouldn't condemn him. We should have compassion and understanding for Milo. Yes, Alex Jones, the guy who's been for years talking about, pedophiles this and, left wing or elite, the elites and the globalists and the elites and the globalists and blah, and Epstein. And then here comes his friend Milo supporting pederasty, and instead of Alex Jones saying, oh my gosh, this is sick, I want nothing to do with this guy, Alex Jones sided with Milo. We have seen this nonsense, this insanity, this sickness too many damn times, I tell you. Too many damn times. And it is quite predictable, and I will say that it is not surprising in the least bit. Not surprising at all. Now, why do I say this? Because I will say that I have something of a history with the world, with the industry of conservatism and the whole business of talking to people. Now, why do I say this? Well, because my father was once a pretty big figure within the American conservative movement. Not so much that my dad was all for this thing called the conservative movement, but really because a lot of people were inviting my dad to go speak at churches and conservative events and things like that. And the reason for this is because my father was really the first person to come out and say, I'm an ex-Muslim, I converted to Christianity. Oh, and also I was once a Palestinian terrorist. Here is my story. And it really blew up. Now, my dad began to tell people about the dangers of Islamic terrorism in the 1990s, in the early 90s, going into the early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s. But my father didn't get any recognition or celebrity status until 9/11. After 9/11, all of a sudden, Fox News wants to talk to my dad, CNN, MSNBC, BBC, all these big media outlets wanted to speak to my father. So my dad began to naturally and expectedly to make connections, to network. And my dad all of a sudden was getting contacted by people who were big in the media, big figureheads, even politicians. And I'm not going to give any names, but at one point in time, our website, our work was receiving funding from some pretty wealthy figureheads within the conservative world. And they are a part of that world that people like Clavin exist in. They are part of that world that outlets like Front Page Magazine exist in, or PJ Media exist in. They're part of that world that people like Steve Crowder are in. And they're pretty big names. And they were giving us, by us, I mean, they were funding our work, which we were doing on our website, shootbot.com. They were funding our work. And they wanted us to be pro-Israel, and they wanted us to just focus on Islam. And there came a point where I said, we need to talk about Sodom. Like, we're not going to be sitting here just, oh, yeah, let's talk about Islam and why Israel is the greatest thing ever. Like, I'm not doing that. You know, I'm a millennial. I'm not getting into that world. So I started writing about Sodom. My father starts talking about Sodom, the problems with Sodom. We both agreed that the problem with a lot of the conservative movement is that it was really either not really seriously talking against Sodom, or it was just very lacking in that regard. So we started writing articles. And not too long after this, all of a sudden we start getting contacted by these big names. And they told us, listen, on the phone, if you don't stop, the money will stop. We're not going to give you guys any more money. And we said, so be it. That's your choice. And the money stopped. And I can tell you right now that the people who told us this were people who are big figureheads in the world that people like Clavin exist in. So when I see a big name popping out, or when I see someone popping out and they're another big name in the conservative world, I am always, 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 always suspicious. Now, I may be wrong. It may be that someone becomes famous purely organically and they have no handlers and no one is behind them. There's no big funders who are behind them. This may be possible. I'm not going to say that it never happens or never will happen. But from my experience and from what I have seen, people who have really big names are well connected. Someone, not all the time, but many times someone is funding them. They're getting big money somehow. And they are really chosen for a specific role. They're chosen to speak a certain narrative and to push for a certain agenda. And if they ever go against that agenda in any way, the plug is pulled from them. And I wish more and more people knew these things. But in this world of talking, be it in the conservative world, or I've never really studied the left-wing world, to be honest with you, not that much. My focus has always primarily been on the conservative world. But in the conservative world, people who get really famous, from what I understand, they tend, I'll say tend, because I don't want to say this is the case 100% of the time, because I haven't looked at every case. But many times, these famous people, they have handlers, or they're connected to someone who's big or who has a lot of influence. They're in some kind of a network that gives them the fame that they're getting. And there are certain narratives that you have to maintain, and there are certain beliefs that you are never to express. And if you go against Sodom, you're out. Milo, I believe, was pushed for a certain reason. I think Ben Shapiro is pushed for a certain reason. I think that, I don't want to say all, but I want to say for the most part, generally speaking, these big figureheads are pushed by people who are wealthy and powerful, and they're pushed for a certain agenda. And I wish more and more people knew this, because so many people fall for these figureheads as if the world they're living in is organic, or as if they've just organically rose up to the top. And I don't think that's always the case. And so when we see, for example, I remember back in the day, there was this big thing. Oh, look, Milo is trolling people, blah, blah, blah. This is amazing. And people look at this and they say, wow, this is so great. But to me, it's all just political theater. It's all political theater. And the masses look at that and they fall for it. And they think it's great. When the reality is that it's for a very insidious and diabolical agenda. And I wish more and more people didn't fall for this type of evil, this evil that masquerades itself so well. Well, not really. It doesn't really masquerade itself so well. For average people, maybe it masquerades itself well, but for people who have a discerning eye, we can see it. But it's so easy to see that I don't see how people just don't see this. Maybe the people who follow these sorts of figureheads, even after knowing that these people are insidious, maybe they're evil themselves. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.